The Postal Service, give up!
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a classic review of this Postal Service album, Give Up, Let's Go. This is the first and only album from Jimmy Tamborello and Mr. Ben Gibbard as a duo, the Postal Service. This is a landmark record from two figures that would take the indie world by storm in the middle aughts, getting the ball rolling on a tidal wave of indietronica music that would stay a pretty essential part of the scene ever since. And not to overcredit Jimmy and Ben on this one, because slipping electronics into the typically guitar-centric sounds of indie was already a thing at the time of the release of this album, thanks to acts like Broadcast or Stereolab or even Jimmy Tamborello's previous work. But the release of this LP was a phenomenon that was like none other at the time. I mean, it was certainly enough to convince Conor Oberst that he could do an electronic record. I should also note that Give Up is just one of only two albums to go platinum status in the Sub Pop Records catalog, with the lead single from this thing, Such Great Heights, reaching gold, and seeing a handful of major advertisement placements too. Keep in mind that this was all happening during a time when these overnight sensations exploding out of the music underground had kind of come and gone with the grunge era. In the early and mid-2000s, between major music publications and radio and television, the industry had pretty well regulated what was relevant and what wasn't. Between post-grunge garbage and dance pop divas and nu metal's final hours, as well as hip-hop's bling era being in full swing, there weren't a lot of spaces in the mainstream for alternative voices. Even with the explosion of emo and pop-punk rocking against Bush, don't wanna be an American idiot! Musically speaking, if you wanted to find something underground or even keep your finger on the pulse of something as commonplace as jazz in the 2000s, you kind of needed to go out of your way to find out about it. Either at an actual place like a performance or a club or a record store, or through what little online sources there were, like peer-to-peer music sharing services, or music journalism upstarts like Pitchfork Media, or obscure music forums. And yes, even though in the 2000s the internet was in fact a thing, the closest thing everyone had to a large-scale social media and music streaming service at the time was MySpace. The internet was there, but it wasn't yet at a place where it was creating these large-scale cultural phenomenons on the level of an odd future. So at that time, it was kind of surprising to see bands like Modest Mouse and Death Cab for Cutie, as well as the Decemberists, landing these major label music deals. All of which I could go on about forever, but that's just kind of a little bit of taste of the context at the time that contributed to why this record stood out in the way that it did. Despite how great this record is, how popular it is as well, it doesn't really seem like that much on the surface, as it is a pretty straightforward collection of 10 tracks rounding out at 44 minutes. And all the tracks on this thing, given the previous output of Ben Gibbard with Death Cab for Cutie, as well as Jimmy's work, especially under the name Dentel, these songs are essentially a perfect marriage of their respective styles. Not only in that they complement each other really well, but they also create something really special together. The beats on this thing generally are very beautiful. They are texture-rich, they're subtly glitchy. In many ways, they're not too unlike a very heady, spacious piece of 90s IDM, but they also sweetly groove along like a nice piece of synth pop too. And given the indie angle of this record as well, a lot of the songs on here are quite quaint. There's also something very calculated about the instrumentals on this record too, constantly veering between desolate dystopia and blissful utopia in such a way where it blurs the lines between the two. I love the rudimentary forlorn intro of the track The District Sleeps Alone Tonight. The song's eventual build up into a very peppy finish is excellent. The subtle touches of background vocals and strings along the way are quite nice. There's also the idyllic Sleeping In, which is a very gentle and beautiful electroacoustic mix. I especially love how the kind of nimble synth bass line on this track mixes with the washy wall of acoustic guitars that kind of envelops the track at the very finish. The lullaby chorus on this track is fantastic. Don't wake me, I plan on sleeping in. It feels like I've been handed the nicest, sweetest, warmest, snuggliest sweater ever, and I'm wearing it, but I'm, basically living through nuclear winter, so you know. The serene instrumental on the track Recycled Air feels like I've been transported into a brave new technocracy, where feelings have been rendered completely obsolete outside of the very low baseline level of ennui due to the prolonged emotional numbness. Then there's the intense and breakbeat heavy closer Natural Anthem, easily the most cacophonous song on the entire record, hitting a point where these looped wailing melodies are laced into a wall of very fast, distorted clipping percussion. This is contrasted by This Place is a Prison, easily the simplest and most minimal song on the entire record. The sound of this track really lives up to the title, as the track does sound pretty desolate, does sound pretty lonely, features very dusty percussion, some rough-sounding bass notes and synthesizers that are cold and smooth like iron bars. The production on this thing generally is just straight excellent. There's plenty of emotional and sonic variety across the record while also sticking pretty boldly to a unique and sharp concept. Many of the beats on this thing are pretty detailed too, featuring some tasteful instrumental switch-ups. The most repetitive track on this thing is most likely Such Great Heights, but that song kind of gets away with it by virtue of being the most irresistibly catchy track on the entire record. The rest of Give Up's appeal, I think, boils down to Ben Gibbard's singing, songwriting, and lyrics. When it comes to indie frontmen, Ben has never really been one of my favorites. However, I absolutely love his singing on this album. It's just something about the very boyish quality of Ben's voice and the very even style in which he sings that just fits perfectly in the bittersweet sterility of songs like We Will Become Silhouettes and Brand New Colony. And Jimmy Tamborello's nods to futurism and utopia in the instrumentals that he creates are also mirrored in Ben's singing and lyrics. To mention the song We Will Become Silhouettes again, the lyrics on this track are loaded with references to, like, prepping for the apocalypse. Filtered water, cans of food, I'm not coming out till this is all over. The air outside is unbreathable. If we breathe it, it'll make us explode. All of which is really just an allegory for a fight in a relationship, or just a really toxic, nasty patch in a relationship that Ben can't seem to manage, can't seem to get through, so he's kind of avoiding all of it till it's done. And this mix of themes also holds true for many other tracks on this album. Ben seems to constantly be working on this sliding scale between dysfunctional relationships and total apocalypse, like again on the song Brand New Colony, where Ben's lyrics reference this love that he's singing about starting anew in a different setting where it can kind of flourish. And this starting anew is represented in a way where it's almost like starting a brand new world, or again, a brand new colony. The song Sleeping In makes reference to global warming and environmental destruction, but also the global populace's ignorance, or I guess lack of understanding of which. Also the JFK assassination, that too. And the song Recycled Air, even though it may just be about one's fear of flying, Ben's anxious and poetic portrayal of this experience, there is something about it that fits in really snugly with everything else on the record. And even though there are some tracks on this thing that are very obviously just about love and not much else, Ben and Jimmy do actually have some pretty refreshing approaches to that, whether it be on the very beautiful and touching Such Great Heights, a song that very much embodies the euphoric high and the eerie feeling of serendipity when you're in a loving relationship that just works. Meanwhile, the song Nothing Better features a duet with singer Jen Wood of the band Tattletale. He's in character, she's in character, and she's essentially playing opposite to the delusions Ben is expressing on this song about whatever relationship they had still existing and flourishing into the future. She kind of reality checks his obsessive outlook where he's imagining him and her growing old together. And being unable to let go of what is essentially lost is a theme that recurs on this record quite often, and is explored even more deeply on the song Clark Gable, I would say, where Ben plays somebody who essentially gets a camera, a whole movie rig going just to invite his ex onto this scene that he's written where he wants her to act as if they're still in love and kiss him, which is about the most hipster thing I could ever imagine, if only it were directed by Wes Anderson. And I know the concept of this track and maybe others on this thing might seem kind of cringy on the surface, but there is something conceptual going on here, I think, with the neurotic romantic angle Ben is constantly working on Give Up that I find pretty intriguing. Overall, there's not really a song on this record I don't love to some degree, not really a lyric or a story or a theme that I don't admire. I think the closing track is a little inconclusive, or it's one of a few moments on here where I wish Ben had just contributed more vocals and lyrics to the song overall. But Give Up, in my opinion, is a near perfectly crafted pop album that is pretty much like I don't know, the indie version of Mad Villainy, though it came out before Mad Villainy, but you get what I'm saying. Two great artists in a particular genre coming together for one single album that is amazing and genre defining and one of the best of the 2000s. So yeah, that's pretty much what this is. It's classic as hell. I love it to death, and I highly recommend it to anybody who has not heard it yet. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't die. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, music forever.